Hi, hi, everybody. Wait, Jeff, are you ready? All right. So it's my pleasure to introduce Melanie Parker. Melanie is the Deputy Director of Sonoma County Regional Park System. She moved back to Sonoma County in 2015 to create a natural resources division for the county park system. And in 2017, she was promoted to her current position as Deputy Director. Melanie earned her undergraduate degree in environmental studies at UC Santa Cruz, one of my alma maters, and her graduate degree in environmental studies at the University of Montana. Uh, Melanie has authored several articles in the Press Democrat about natural resources on topics such as conservation grazing, the use of prescribed fire, and articles on wildlife species, including otters, beavers, and mountain lions. Melanie is an adjunct professor at Santa Rosa Junior College. She is board president of Together Bay Area, which is a coalition of nonprofits, public agencies, and local Native American organizations that work together to sustain the land for future generations. Melanie is the mother of two teenagers who attend Santa Rosa High School. And when she's not working, she loves hiking, cooking, and painting watercolors. So please help me welcome Melanie Parker.
Great. Oh, there we go. You can hear me now. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. I was saying, pre-pandemic, I got to do this quite a lot, and it's been a while. So it was really fun to put together a PowerPoint for you all and just think, where are we in 2023 in Sonoma County with our park system? So I'll go ahead and share that with you today. But before I start, raise your hand if you go to a park at least once a month. Keep it up if it's as much as once a week. All right, we have parkies here. Are there any Sonoma County Regional Parks members? Awesome, thank you. So I don't need to tell you why parks are important, but I will tell you that 5 years ago, I was on this mantra of, parks are not nice to haves, board of supervisors, decision makers. Parks are need to haves. And, I would say that, and everyone would kind of nod and say, yeah, parks are need to haves, and I'd make this point about you got to get kids off their screens. And, we need it for our mental health, we need it for our physical health, and we need it for the environment and the pollinators. And people would sort of go, yeah, parks are cool. And then the pandemic hit. And boy, howdy, did people discover the outdoors and the value of their parks. We had visitorship go through the roof, and we had people coming out of the woodwork who had never kayaked and were trying kayaking, had never camped and were trying camping. So it's been a really interesting time to be in the parks business, so to speak. And I do feel like it's a visceral thing. We all get it now. We need the outdoors. So with that, I will talk a little bit. I was asked to talk a little bit about my own personal journey. Hold on. Not advancing. Technology help, Judy. Did I pull up the wrong one, perhaps? Oh, it's because we need to restart it from the beginning, I think, yeah. There we go. I think I just clicked on the first slide and that's what happened. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. All right, continued. So I was asked to talk a little bit about my journey, which was a little bit profiled in the prologue, but I'm a very place-based person. And when I live in a place, I typically go pretty deep into it. So in the upper left, as noted, I was born and raised here in Santa Rosa in Rincon Valley, actually. Went to Rincon Valley Junior High, which used to go to 9th grade. Left here in the late 70s, moved to the South Bay, graduated from high school down there, migrated over the hill to UC Santa Cruz. And I was in Santa Cruz for a pretty good long time, a decade plus. And after doing my undergrad there, I did a graduate degree in education. I did my teacher certificate at UCSC. And then I went downtown and taught at not Santa Rosa High School, Santa Cruz High School for 5 years. And I loved that job. I was just talking to a school administrator here. I loved that. It was the best job I loved to hate. I loved the kids, but boy, was it a burnout job, as many of you who are educators know, 180 kids a day, all with different backgrounds and needs. And I was all in for those kids. And I realized I was never going to buy a house in Santa Cruz on a teacher's salary. So I started casting about, and I was always a mountain girl growing up. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go to graduate school. And I looked across the country and there were many programs, but my major professor at UCSC, and I was very influenced by my two major professors, one of whom had worked with the Gwich'in in Alaska on conserving salmon, and the other of whom worked with the Maasai in Tanzania protecting elephants. And I very early as a young person was kind of inculcated into the thinking that people who live in a landscape over time and know that landscape should and are often best suited to be part of the protectors, even though they're often cast as just the opposite because they're using those animals or using those plants or using those resources. So I ended up through Dick Cooley, my major professor. He had reviewed all the environmental graduate programs in the country, and he came back and said, Missoula, Montana is the best program I've seen. So I quickly packed up my things in January of 1995 and moved up to Missoula, spent 6 months teaching, substitute teaching, got my residency, and then went to graduate school in Montana. So the upper right picture is a place called the Swan Valley. For those of you that have been to Montana or go there frequently, the Swan Valley is about halfway between Missoula, Montana, and Glacier National Park. It's a beautiful rural valley. It's dotted with wetlands, grizzly bears abound, and it's was a small logging community that was very much in transition at the time. So I ended up through a combination of friends and my soon-to-be husband starting a nonprofit in the Swan Valley. We were partnered with the University of Montana, and we did restoration work, wildlife species recovery work. And what we did was we created jobs for displaced timber workers in these new economies. And then our other revenue stream was that we invited students from all over the country really to come and study with us. And so we created something called Northwest Connections. It had a good long life. My kids were born there. And then very much as was said in 2015, I was looking to come back to Sonoma County. No small feat when you've given up the California economy to go to the Northern Rockies, where I was getting paid something like $35,000 a year to be an executive director, but it didn't matter because we could afford to live there. Coming back here, this is how I met Sue Carell. So I moved back here in June. Some friends of friends, my Rolodex to speak in the Bay Area was pretty old, but I called some old colleagues. And one of them said, you need to meet Carol Hart. Carol Hart is the director of Sonoma County Regional Parks. I just know the two of you are going to hit it off. So amid other interviews, I came down, had an informational interview with Carol Hart. Some of you may remember her. She's certainly in the paper quite often. She's a 30-year veteran of open space and parks world in Sonoma County. And she said, and her deputy at the time, Jim Nantel, said, we feel like we're growing. We have all these new parks, and we don't really know how to steward them. And we don't really have the muscle in our organization to steward them. Would you come here and create a natural resource division? There's a hitch. There's no money. There's no staff. And there's no will in the organization to have it. And I was like, right on, sounds like a great challenge. Let's do it. So they literally created what's called an extra help position. It's not a real position in the county. It's just a seasonal, it's like our park aides, $16 an hour to be a park aide. They brought me in as a division manager, extra help. And the goal was to make this thing real in a year. So I literally cold called all the major environmental foundations in the Bay Area. And one in particular, the Moore Foundation, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, I pestered that poor fellow for 6 months. He finally had coffee with me, and I said, Dan, you have no business buying lands and conveying them to Sonoma County Regional Parks because we don't have the capacity to steward them. How about you give me a 3-year grant to stand up a natural resource division? And he bit. And I was able to leverage that with other dollars. And then I was able to go to the board of the supervisors and say, look what we can do. We can raise money from the community. And then the board created the position. And then I got the position. It would have been a real bummer if they created it and I hadn't gotten it. That would have been a real bummer. But that's kind of my journey in brief. That was really fun. I'm kind of a starter by design, and then promoted to the deputy position. And the fun thing about that, well, let me go backwards for a second. Trust me, I'll get to regional parks, but they asked me to talk about this stuff. So one of the things that happened when I came in 2015, I didn't make the Sue Carell connection. So I was living at the Fountain Grove Inn with my kids because I couldn't find a rental. It was a really, really tough market. And for a single person who just took a new job, how are you going to get any cred, right? And I'd gone to multiple places, been turned down, and I saw this. I would check Craigslist and every listing, like every hour. And at 3 p.m., I saw a Craigslist listing, and it said, rental out on Sullivan Way near the park here. And I emailed, and Sue Carell got back to me and said, meet me there at 5. And I drove there at 5, and I still had my office wear on, and I went down the driveway, and we talked for like 3 minutes, and she said, you got it. And it was a beautiful home. My kids loved living there, and we lived there until 2018 when we bought a house in Santa Rosa. So thank you, Sue, for believing in me. So when I became natural resource manager, the first thing I said is, hey guys, what are we doing about fire? Because I lived in the Northern Rockies where we'd had big fires in 2000, 2002, 2005, 2007, et cetera. And people in the organization said, shh, we don't have fire here, and we don't talk about fire. And I said, well, what about prescribed fire? Do you do any thinning? Like, what are we doing? Again, shh, don't talk about fire. It'll make the neighbors, nervous. And I was at that point a pretty established ecologist, and I would walk through the forest here and see these burn scars from the 60s and the 30s and before that. And I'm thinking, really? And then, of course, 2017 occurred, and it was really, we had laid the groundwork at parks, but that was really the thing that allowed us to turn our world around. We have a very robust prescribed fire program now, a very robust thinning program, appropriate, ecologically based thinning. And our parks very much think about themselves as neighbors and how to be good neighbors. So that has really changed. And then in 2018, when I promoted to deputy, one of the things that we had tried in 2016 was to pass some sort of supporting funding stream for the parks. It had failed. It was called Measure J. At that time, it was a 1/4 cent sales tax in only the unincorporated portions of Sonoma County. 2018, we actually went back to the voters and we got a parks dedicated funding source. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Okay, Sonoma County Regional Parks. So I noticed in your intro, it said 50+ parks. So we're a growing park system. We're 60 facilities right now. You have to realize when I say facilities, that does mean parks. It does mean open space preserves. We also manage the marinas at Bodega Bay, which not a lot of people realize. So we have Mason's Marina and Spud Point Marina for commercial fishermen. And we have the Sports Fishing Center where captains will take you out on a boat for recreational fishing. So that's a hidden sort of part of our park system. We're 130 full-time employees, but we grow every summer by about 100 people as seasonal staff working as park aides and lifeguards. We have about 16,000 acres, which is 1/3 more acres than we had 5 years ago. So pretty robust growth curve, and I can go into that in the Q&A if you'd like as to why and how that occurred. We're not on that same trajectory right now. We're kind of leveling off, but just important to see. We have 30,000 park members in the county. So that's that $69 pass that gets you into all the parks plus some free camping. And as I said, more parks coming online. We don't just have parks. We have so many programs. One thing that people don't often realize, I'm going to try my new technology. Does that? No. There we go. Oh, that's so cool. Education. We are the largest environmental educator in Sonoma County. So on any given year, about 20,000 kiddos go on field trips run by Sonoma County Regional Parks. It's an amazing system. We offer recreation programs, interpretation programs. One that we're very excited about and have received national awards for is the Youth Exploring Sonoma program. So these are targeted at kids that it started out as a coastal program, and the target audience was young people 16 to 24 who had never seen the ocean and live in Sonoma County, and there are a bunch of them. So it started out with a Coastal Conservancy grant. We've now grown the program. We have Yes River, which gets kids out on the river, and Yes Mountain, which gets kids backpacking. So that's been a growing and exciting piece of what we do. We have our youth crew, which is really a career development program for young youth. We have a number of youth with a number of obstacles in their life, and it's kind of their leg up and into a potential career with parks or other organizations. And we have a really robust volunteer program doing everything from pulling out weeds like they are on the bottom there, a lot of trail stewardship, volunteer trail patrols, those kinds of things. I spent way too long trying to turn a simple Excel graph, which I've done a million times, into a pie chart, and I gave up yesterday. I was like, they don't care, Melanie, if you have a pie chart or not. But here's the percentages. Hopefully they add up to 100, but general fund, what does that mean? That means property taxes. So most of county services are paid for through property taxes. We get about 11% of our budget, which this year is $48 million from the general fund. Other county funds are things like either TOT, the bed tax. We get a little bit of TOT money. We also get monies from other agencies. So for instance, we manage parks that are owned by Sonoma Water, like Spring Lake and Riverfront, and they give us funds to manage those facilities as parks. Our day use fees and our camping fees amount to nearly 1/5 of our budget. So that's an important chunk of what we do. We get a lot of our money, especially for capital projects. In other words, building things from grants, state and federal, more state than federal. And like I said, we've got now the Parks for All measure, which I'll go into in more depth, about 20, inching between a fifth and a quarter of our annual budget. Our marinas are self-supported. We don't change monies back and forth between the marinas and parks. They're an enterprise fund, but it does show up in our budget, so 8%. And then we have an awesome Sonoma County Regional Parks Foundation, which I'll also talk about a little bit more. So Parks for All. The notion behind Parks for All when we passed it in 2018 was to create a funding system for county and city parks. So at this point, it's a 1/8 cent tax, sales tax. So every time you buy something, including online in Sonoma County, 1/8 of a cent goes into this fund. It produces about $15 million a year in today's terms. And 2/3 of that money, so 10 million, comes to regional parks, and 1/3 goes to all the cities by population. So Santa Rosa here is getting something like $2 million a year out of the Parks for All tax. Something like Cloverdale is getting $70,000 a year, but there's still really meaningful dollars to invest in parks and open space. Our 2/3 comes in 3 buckets. You don't really need to know the details, but just so you know that what we told the voters and what we report back to the voters is that we're maintaining the parks, we are providing increased access for the parks, and we are stewarding the parks. So we have kind of 3 main focal areas there. We do have a citizens oversight committee. So if you're interested in yet another volunteer opportunity, you could join our oversight committee, which meets 4 times a year and oversees all the financials of the sales tax. And the sales tax has a maintenance of effort language. So what that means is that the voters can rest assured that the county or the city councils, county board of supervisors, city councils, can't just say, oh, that's good, you got your sales tax, we'll just take some of your general fund away. So it basically says you have to keep parks funding at the same level. So this is something I started when I first came to regional parks. We hadn't really had a plan to speak of for a while. So every 3 years now, we put out to the community, we reach out to the community and get input, and then we go back to the community with our strategic priorities. So obviously, we have had so much work to do in terms of making our parks more climate adapted to burning. We're building things out of metal, not wood. We're rethinking park design. We've got sea level rise to deal with at Doran. We've got a whole suite of things that we're leaning into in the next 3 years. Similarly, making parks more equitable. Not everyone has equal access to parks and park programs, so working on that. Due to the pandemic, we had even more impacts to our river parks and coastal parks. So figuring out how to reduce those impacts, spread visitors across the landscape, and also educate visitors as what to bring and not to bring, what to do and not to do, all those kinds of things. Stabilizing the organization, because of the growth, we had some need to invest in facilities. And then enhancing visitor experience really comes down to being able to do things on your phone, like book a campsite or change a campsite. But it also has to do with improving our signage, getting rid of sign clutter, those kinds of things. By the way, cutest photo, I love that photo. I thought I'd call out accessibility. You know, I'm not just saying this because this is Oakmont, but we are an aging demographic in Sonoma County. We are literally aging over the next 10 to 20 years. So as a parks department, we have to really double down on what does that mean for accessibility. And we also have other aspects of accessibility that we're working on, not just physical accessibility, but also, equitable access. But something you should know is that we just hired a woman, Nubia Padilla. She is our accessibility and inclusivity manager, the first department ever in the county to have such a thing. She's creating, you'll see very soon in the parks and on our website, a new reporting system to really solicit your input on, what are you finding accessible and what are you really not finding accessible and what do you wish we had? We are doubling down on miles of accessible trails and things like accessible kayak launches, all these sorts of things that allow people to do the things that they love to do. providing programs for diversity of audiences. This is a huge desire of Supervisor Gorin here, which is more bikeways in particular throughout the county. It's very hard work, it's very long-term, it's very expensive, as you can imagine, in Sonoma County, but it's something we are completely committed to. And then, as I said before, improving our signage. So I alluded before that, I mean, I don't know what normal is anymore. All these overlapping emergencies, our whole staff, our whole community is trauma, it has been traumatized. What is the word I'm looking for? Thank you, traumatized. I'm like, what's the, but the fires were just incredible and severe. Have my own stories of that. So the pandemic, the floods on the river have really been an impact to us. Actually, this last winter, the wind was one of the biggest things. We lost so many mature trees throughout the park system because of the high winds that we were having. So that's been a real big challenge for the park system. The second bullet there is it's easy to get money to build something new. It's really hard to get money to build something. So if a tennis court is cracked and full of grass and the playground is broken and the soccer field has holes in it, really hard to raise monies for those. So redeveloping parks has been a big challenge for us. We're really successful at leveraging money, but it continues to be a challenge for us. I talked about the overcrowding that's been a challenge, equity I kind of touched on, and the last one, as you all know, unfortunately, Sonoma County Regional Parks is in the paper as often for many of the things I've talked about as it is for our challenge of dealing with homelessness, which is a countywide, statewide, nationwide, worldwide struggle. So homelessness continues to be a big one for us, particularly on the Joe Rodota Trail, but in other parts of the county as well. Some opportunities, well, with the emergencies came a lot of one-time funding. So we had PG&E settlement money that came after the Tubbs fire and Nuns fire. We had ARPA money come in. We've had COVID relief money come in. So these are great. You just got to be ready for them. You got to have a bucket for that rainstorm and a place to put it. But we have done some really cool things with one-time funding. We've converted facilities to solar, put in more EV chargers, things that are just one-time expenses. Another opportunity is our sales tax sunsets 2028. So we'll be going back to the voters to talk about reauthorization. And whether or not that's something the voters support for their park system. And I put plural because we have a sister organization, Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District. They also have a tax measure that is for acquiring land, and that sunsets in 2031. So we'll be working together to figure that out. Another opportunity is that properties are turning over, and I will show you a few in your neighborhood here that we've been able to add to the park system. A lot of folks, and I've been out with a number of families, their property burned. It doesn't have the same feel to them as it did before. Maybe the kids don't want to inherit it. Maybe they want to move to Tennessee, fill in the blank. And so many of those families are coming to government and saying, is there a possibility that, you'd want to add this to the park, or you'd want to create this as a park? So that is, and it's not just because of the fires, but the fires are definitely driving some of that turnover. And then the other opportunity, which I'll get to with our foundation, is we do have planned giving. We just took our first bequest through the foundation about 3 years ago, and now it's a growing system. I don't think Regional Parks was really in that business before, but our Parks Foundation has really, really grown. So our Parks Foundation is not a government entity. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. And they exist, their sole purpose is to help support their county park system. And there's all the things that they do. Melissa Kelly is the executive director. You may have met her. And the biggest thing, I've been to Melissa's talks a number of times, and the thing that she always says is, what you may not realize is that the single biggest driver of the Parks Foundation is individual donors. And that comes in the form of, cash and stock donations, qualified charitable distributions, donor advised funds, and bequests, like I was saying. So this is an organization, when I got here, their budget was about 100,000. Their budget's now about $2 million a year that they are raising with and for the regional parks. And in addition to them, I just wanted you to know what some of our other sort of key partners are. So I mentioned the Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District. Another nonprofit that's a key partner for us is Sonoma Land Trust, been in Sonoma County for a long time. And they are just what it says, they're in the land trust business. So they either work with private landowners to put conservation easements on land, or they work with private landowners who want to sell and convey those lands to somebody like us, a park system. Together Bay Area used to be called the Bay Area Open Space District. It's a really fun group of people for me. It's people like us who have parks and open space organizations and nonprofits from the whole 9 counties of the Bay Area plus Santa Cruz County. And we get together and we lobby for state funds. We educate each other on best practices. We use each other as sort of a brain trust. And then many, many, many other smaller nonprofits. I called out a few here, but I'm sure you know many others: Land Paths, Circuit Riders, Sonoma Ecology Center. We do a lot through our partners because our partners have those relationships. They have, their own sort of workforce. And so we partner often with our nonprofit sister and brother organizations, Parks Foundation. And then, conservation grazing. One of the ways that we manage our parks is through grazing, sheep, goats, cattle, both dairy and beef cattle. And we can only do that in partnership with local grazers who are often either own ranches or manage ranches or are producers themselves. Sorry about that. All right. So I could talk all day long about new, exciting park projects, but I picked a few, some of which I thought would be interesting to you because they're close by, and some of which I thought would be interesting to you because they're not close by, and you might want to, think about sort of countywide. So this is Hood Mountain Regional Park. The bulk of Sugarloaf is actually off to the right. So even though that upper part says Sugarloaf, that's the McCormick addition to Sugarloaf. Oh, I can use my tool. Wait. Ooh. Okay. So that is Sugarloaf, but that's not the main Sugarloaf. So main Sugarloaf is off the screen to the right. But we have had, as I said, a really awesome set of opportunities. So we have, in the last 5 years, added the Fitzsimmons expansion. So this is a piece of property that was never developed, was owned by the family just as a getaway piece of property, is now part of Hood Mountain. The Spalding expansion, which is just a fantastic piece of property that just had a small little kind of recreational home along the creek. There's a waterfall here in this property. It's kind of an in-holding when you've kind of come down the creek from Los Alamos and turned up towards the state park. We added this piece here, Cougar Landing, which is the top of the mountain, was slated for a huge mega home. Actually had a big pot grow on top of it for a long time. We were able to get that into the park system, so it's a dramatic panoramic overview that you can now hike to on the new Lawson Trail. The Lawson Addition, which is this piece, was added. And is that it? Oh, Mix. So this is a redwood grove down along the creek. Again, a neighboring family had 40 acres, thought it would make a good addition to the park. And then up here, this is the black line is the Napa County line. So that's the ridge of the Miacamas right there on the black line. All of this property is part of the McCormick inholding and will be conveyed to regional parks later this summer. And we will actually co-manage, because part of it is on the Napa side, we will co-manage this addition with Napa Open Space and Napa Parks District. So that's, Hood Mountain is growing, and part of why that's important is that, ecologically, larger protected areas are more refuge for critters, but also, every time, you guys, every time that we pull development out of some of these fire-prone areas, the better off it is for everyone involved. And so we've really had some opportunities here. And I'll answer questions on any and all of these. Another one that you might not know about is something that we call Monorio Regional Park and Open Space. So it is, this is the Monorio Bridge. So if you ever go to Monorio and you go down to the river on that sort of sandy spot, and then you come up here and there's a little restaurant and a skate park. This property straddles Dutchbill Creek, kind of borders the Bohemian Club up in this region. It borders Willow Creek and Mendocino Redwood Company land on this side. So it's a beautiful regional park that this community will have for itself. They'll be able to hike and bike there, just like many of us use our regional parks in our neighborhoods. But it will also become a destination park. And long-term, we imagine it being connected to Willow Creek and all the way over to Shell Beach. So this will be in addition to sort of the larger Willow Creek park area. It's also our only really dedicated redwood park. Stillwater Cove is redwoods, but this is all second and third generation redwoods. So we have an opportunity to regrow old growth redwoods on this property over the next 50 to 100 years, which I find exciting. Okay, come on. Oh, I think it's because this image is so big. It's taking a minute. Taylor Mountain. Taylor Mountain, how many of you have been to Taylor Mountain? Yeah. Have you noticed the new trails there? They're much better than those old ranch roads that went straight up the hill. So we're redeveloping the trails on the part that already has trails. But the really exciting thing, in my opinion, is, so this is where the trail system goes. This is how you get to the top-ish of the mountain, right there next to Kendall Jackson. The actual top of the mountain is on KJ land. So this is, this is the Petaluma Hill side of the park. This is the Kiwanis Springs side of the park. Y'all know that the Kiwanis Springs Resort was a hot spring resort back in the day, and it went dry in the 1906 earthquake. So every time we have an earthquake, I'm waiting for the text that says the hot springs is back, because I think that's going to be awesome, but it's not back yet. But this whole side of the mountain over here, as yet, does not have trails. So we have already built 8 miles of trail, including 1.2 mile ADA trail that's absolutely gorgeous along Colgan Creek here in the bottom of the drainage. So that will open this fall in September. We have a couple of bridges to install this summer to make that, to connect that trail system. And then another piece that you might not know is that as you go off north here to the old Caltrans right away, the Highway 12, soon to, or, later to be Southeast Greenway, we were able to purchase the Cooper Creek edition, so that this now runs right down through the synagogue and right to the sort of Hone Highway 12 interchange. So you will eventually be able to walk or ride your bike from Taylor Mountain along the Southeast Greenway and to Spring Lake and beyond. So that's a pretty exciting vision coming real. And this is our director's favorite. I'm convinced it's because he was born in 1973. But Spring Lake turns 50 this year, which is pretty cool. I remember being a little kid in the 70s and going and fishing for bluegill at Spring Lake back in the day. So we are celebrating it by investing in it. So you'll see a lot of new paving going on for the pathways. You'll see restrooms fixed up. We have a brand new concession, Sonoma Burger, coming in to the swimming lagoon there. So a number of improvements in Spring Lake that you'll see. No, doesn't work one way, it'll work the other way. And then this one is exciting to me. So if you're driving up 101 and you're going up to Cloverdale, and then you go past Cloverdale, and just as you get to the Mendocino line, you'll see an exit that is the old highway, right? Goes down to a private campground there along the river. That old highway section that goes through the community of Preston, essentially, was all land owned by Caltrans, and we have this amazing, lovely, back from retirement, we were having that conversation, planner, Russ Pinto, who he just loved to go into the depths of, the titles of all the properties. And he came to us one day and he said, for God's sake, all this riverfront is owned by Caltrans. Why don't we just convert it to the parks and give it people more river access? And right now it's got quite a homeless situation. So again, it's quite often we will inherit these properties. They're a little expensive to sort of bring into the system, but once they are, this is a mile and a half of river frontage, and it's absolutely so fun to inner tube. If you or your children or your grandkids want to do something fun this summer, you put in right at the county line and you take out right at Preston. It's about 3 hours of just wandering on an inner tube down through these kind of, you'd think you were in the Sierras because it's kind of this rocky canyon that kind of flows back and forth, pretty consistent flow. It's obviously dam run from lake run from Mendocino Lake. So it's pretty nice, cool water in the summer when it's 100 degrees or plus. So Russian River Parkway is on its way into the system, and you can use it now. It's just a lovely stretch of river. And this is part of our theory here, is just to give people more access points to the river so they're not all going to Steelhead or Mom's Beach. There's going to be other opportunities to access the Russian River. So I think I'm just here to talk about what you want to talk about. So I would love to just hear what your questions are, your comments, where you want to take the conversation.
Thank you, Melanie. And Lynn and I will have microphones here for you. Go ahead, Lynn. You want a question there?
Hi, thank you so much for your presentations. Very informative. I'm curious about the policy within the parks about fire mitigation. You said that you're doing some controlled burns, and but when trees come down, do you leave the litter on the ground, or are you carting it out, or are you just burning it up, or what do you do? I mean, because I walk through a lot of these parks and I see what looks a lot like a lot of fuel to me on the ground.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that.
Of course. Great question. The question was, I'm curious what you all do about fire mitigation. And when trees fall and limbs fall, do you pick them up? Do you clear them? Do you just leave them there? And the observation was, many times I'm in parks and I see a lot of clutter, downfall, and I wonder what's going on. Is that about right? Okay. So it depends. And it also, so you have to realize that in order for us to manage forests, trees, shrubs, we have to go through CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act. So CEQA has a special exemption for 100 forests within 100 feet of a structure. And we have historically, like many other parks organizations, interpreted trails to be structures. So when you go to a lot of the parks, we started in Hood Mountain, this is pre-fire, doing what we call shaded fuel breaks within 100 feet either side of the trail. So that as the fire comes, at least as it approaches the trail, there's no ground fuel, right? So it can just creep through instead of blowing through, unless there's a 100-mile-an-hour wind, but that's game's off at that point. So we do a lot of that. If you go to Shiloh, you go to Foothill, many of our parks have trail side treatments. You'll see less of that at state parks. So if you're thinking Jack London or Annandale, you're not going to see quite as much of that. We have a little bit more robust vegetation management program. If you want to treat beyond the 100 feet, then you really have to go to the next level of environmental assessment. What are you impacting? What species are you impacting? So for those kinds of projects, we are just really now at the point of having the staffing and capacity to do those larger CEQA analyses, and we partnered with CAL FIRE to do that. So we have a big project on the interior of Shiloh right now, where we're actually treating most of the park, the interior. We are queuing up projects at Foothill, Monterey Redwoods, Stillwater. I think those are all the ones in the queue right now. So it just takes a certain amount of time to do the paperwork and the analysis before you can go out there with chainsaws. Our maintenance crews, I would say, are usually pretty robust at picking up anything that actually hits a trail. But I hear what you're saying, which is the larger fuel load in the forest. Yeah.
Can you tell us what's happening with Annandale in terms of development or accessibility?
I can't. We did actually manage Annandale for a short time. Regional Parks did when the state was closing parks all over 2008, 9, 10. We managed Annandale. We don't manage it right now. I haven't talked to anyone at Annandale about accessibility. I've talked to them about the vegetation consideration, so I can't field that question. I'm sorry. I could try to do a little homework though and get back to you. Yeah.
Annandale is a state park.
Annandale is a state park, yes.
I want to make a comment about my recent hiking in Sonoma Valley Regional Park, which I just love that park too. It's off Highway 12.
Yeah.
Just past Arnold Drive. I've seen them do a lot of trail maintenance and rerouting trails that were too steep.
Yeah.
And now they've got some nice, and they've done some vegetation management to make it less mitigate fire risk. So I want to compliment the work that I've recently experienced in Sonoma Valley Regional Park. I recommend you all go there.
Is there a way to remove the reeds that fill in the various sight spots of the Spring Lake?
The Thule.
Many of the really lovely sites that you could look across the lake, you can't see across.
Yeah, the Thules.
The
That's what you're
Thules.
talking about, the Thule reeds. The only place we really aggressively manage the Thules is at the boat launch, because it really interferes with your ability to put boats on the water. For the rest of it, we mostly don't manage the Thules because they're wildlife habitat and bird habitat. You'll see some places where they'll get managed like right in front of a bench or something like that. But for the most part, we don't manage the Thules. They are, a natural part of the ecosystem. Yeah. Interesting side note to the Thule harvest question, though. Our tribal partners, Thule was a very important cultural plant for tribes here. So this most recent time that we managed Thules at Spring Lake, a woman named Robin Mealy from Confederate Indians of Great Rancheria came out, and her grandmother is still a well-known pomo basket weaver. And Robin came out and sort of oversaw the harvest. And so we took all those Thules down to Tole, and then the kids on their field trips got to learn directly from Robin and other Native Americans how to work Thule. So I'll put a little pin in it to say if we can build that partnership a little bit more, we might have, hit that balance point in a little different place. So, yeah.
Can you talk more about wheelchair accessible trails and where they are?
Exactly. That is the problem. Not only do we not have enough, but the ones we have, we don't actually tell you about. It's a best kept secret. So it's really awful. No, trust me, other advocates have come out of the community and said, you guys, this is awful. So one of Nubia's first jobs that she's literally doing right now is inventorying every accessible feature and making sure those all go on the website. And then we actually produce a brochure that summarizes where all the accessible features are at a one-stop shop. We just never did that. It was like one of those things that was just falling through the cracks. It's like the planners weren't doing it, the communicators weren't doing it, no one was doing it. And so finally we have the capacity to do it. So it's literally getting done right now. Yeah.
Melanie, could you address the problems we're having on Joe Rodata? I know there's been a lot of community feedback from that about the degradation of the creeks, and especially when we had all the rain that came in and washed everything away. What do you see as the solution for transients living in the park system?
Yeah. First of all, Joe Rodota was our first parks director. So our current parks director says, please don't ever name a trail after me. Because Joe Rodota is always on the front page, but it's not because he was such a great parks director, it's because the trail is named after him. The situation on the Joe Rodota Trail is so nuanced and so difficult to unpack for people, but I'll give you a few pieces of it. One is it's a county facility inside city limits. Bad. Who's in charge, the county or the city? The city will say the county will say the city all day long, every day, especially if it takes, capacity to deal with it. Second of all, it is the subject of a Ninth Circuit Court decision, which impacts all of us in the Ninth Circuit Court, that says you cannot remove an unhoused person from public land unless you can offer that person an alternative home. So we are all subject to that. And then we're subject to a very special injunction that has to do with that specific piece of real estate where the Joe Rodota Trail is, which sort of amplifies that and says, you basically, it just amplifies it and makes the consequences worse if we were not to do anything. So the answer is short-term, medium-term, and long-term housing for people. It's not a problem that parks can solve, but we definitely partner with the health department and others to solve it. So combination of carrot, and then with the stick, the board will be hearing a second reading, I think in 2 weeks, on an anti-camping ordinance that will clarify that you are not allowed to be on public land between the hours of sunset and sunrise, basically. So combination of our rangers having a little bit more tools in their box. And as you know, they've been standing up more and more temporary housing and trying to get more and more transitional housing in place. So, it's been really a hard place to be in, but I can tell you that our parks partners in LA, San Francisco, Portland, Denver, all across the region are having similar consternations. Yeah.
Sure. Back over here.
You guys are fun. These are hard questions.
Do you have a relationship with Fish and Wildlife? And if so, what is it?
We do. We actually have some facilities that are owned by Fish and Wildlife and we manage. Sunset Beach on Russian River is owned by CDFW. Hoodeman Slough down in the Baylands area is owned by CDFW. And then we also, CDFW is often a funder of ours. So there's a lot of statewide grants that come through CDFW and Wildlife Conservation Board for park development purposes. So Tole had a huge WCB grant. And then on the enforcement side, because we do have poaching and especially out at Doran and places like that where we partner on the law enforcement side of things or harassing marine mammals, all those kinds of things, we partner with our CDFW colleagues. So yeah, quite a lot, actually. Yeah.
I think you said that, I'm over here, Melanie. I think you said that the park system has grown by a third
Yes.
in terms of property in 5 years.
Yeah.
And I imagine that's a mixed blessing.
Yeah.
Lots of challenges. What would be the top 3 challenges?
Okay, well, first I'll tell you the story of why. So our partners, the Ag Preservation Open Space District, 1/4 cent tax. So they're getting about now close to $30 million a year, which amazingly doesn't buy a lot of real estate in Sonoma County, but it does buy real estate. They bought a number of parcels in the early years that were slated to become state parks. So Calabasas, which is very close to here, was slated to be a state park because it's so close to Sugarloaf. Carrington Ranch was slated to be in addition to Sonoma Coast Ranch. That's down at the base of Coleman Valley Road. Wright Hill was slated to be part of Sonoma County State Parks. It's sort of an in-holding, if you would, up on top of the range. Many properties. And then what happened was the fiscal downturn, 07, 08, and state parks literally went into consolidation mode. They wanted to close, they did close about a third of the state parks. That's why you have nonprofits that have stepped in to run a lot of state parks across the state of California. And so Ag and Open Space here in this county looked to regional parks and said, well, is there any chance you could manage them? And our former director, Carol Hart, was, hell yeah, we'll take them. Many of those, several of those have been sitting over at Ag and Open Space. Carol became the interim general manager at Ag and Open Space last year, just as they were hiring a new general manager. And she said, let's get these things transferred. So she pushed them all over to the park side of the house, which is great. It is a mixed blessing. So what are the top 3 challenges? Okay. Part of it is managing the public's expectations. So I think part of it is metering out these parks in a way that people can understand that Carrington might not be open for 5 years, but Calabasas, we can probably get open in 3 years. So it's managing the public's expectation would be 1. 2 is just having eyes and ears on all the properties, right? So we have a really robust camp host program, volunteers who are hosts in our campgrounds. We're building out a camp host program that is really just a eyes and ears on the property, you know, take your 5th wheel, or we put something up on a property and you promise to be there and tell us if anything, any pot growers show up or anything like that. So we've got that program. And, I mean, just capacity right now, the labor market in Sonoma County is really fickle right now. And so it's really hard to get certain kinds of positions filled. We have lost 4 planners. They really are the people that develop the parks. And we are competing in the Bay Area market for those professional positions. So we just got approval from the board to give, essentially hiring bonuses for people to come and relocate into Sonoma County and take some of these more technical positions. So that's a big challenge. Yeah.
Oh, I think you answered a lot of questions already in this last piece, and I just want to tell you how much I appreciate how articulate you have been able to express something that is so vital to me, because I go every day to one of the parks, Spring Lake, Sonoma Valley Regional, and I feel it's just an essential part to the happiness of my life.
Yeah.
And I say, what can I do? How can I help more? Because I can't be more enthusiastic or more excited about something that's so essential and a real treasure that you're looking out to, expand and cultivate.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yeah.
That's just a big, big, big thank
Yeah, you're welcome. Absolutely. I'll take that to as a segue to make a couple of points. Only 6% of Sonoma County is publicly accessible. So we think of our park system as being pretty robust, but you compare that to Marin, say, that's 70% public land, or, Alameda County, that's 30% public land, or, in my humble opinion, we have room to grow. We could get to 11%, and that would be okay. And we're not taking over the world. We're just giving enough access for ourselves and our future generations to be able to experience what you're experiencing throughout the county, not just in, certain parts of the county. So, yeah.
And I want to say, I so appreciate your enthusiasm for the parks. I think you are truly the right person for this job.
Oh,
and we are very fortunate to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Melanie? I think we have a couple over here. Lynn, can you get that one?
Hi, I want to say thank you again for what you're doing. 2 quick questions. One, the space, I think you said it's from Taylor Mountain down to Hohen, that wide space.
Yeah.
What are the planning details and timeline for that? And then second quick question, I haven't heard you talk about docent programs. Maybe you could speak to docents.
Yeah. We actually don't have a docent program, which is something that's been on the question mark list for a while. We have programs that are run by our staff, and we have some programs that are run by volunteers, but we don't have a park docent like Bouverie does, or, some of our other park systems. It's something we've thought about building out. And back to your point, You can volunteer. You can donate to the Parks Foundation. You can just follow us on social media. You can tell all your friends to vote for the reauthorization of the, oh, I can't see that. Oh, it's Sunday. It's okay. I'm not working. Phew. But to the Cooper Creek edition, the Cooper Creek edition will be very simple. It'll really just be a trail that connects the Southeast Greenway. There's a tiny little opportunity to build a 5-10 car parking lot at the end of Linwood. If you know where Linwood is, if you take kind of the back way to Costco, right by that neighborhood. But that's something, one of the really huge challenges for the Parks Department is everybody wants a park in their backyard until people go there and until people want to park there, and then they hate you. So it's a constant dance. And so I don't foresee Cooper Creek having a lot of parking opportunities. It'll be, you're coming in from town, the Southeast Greenway, or you're coming in from Taylor Mountain, or maybe you rode your bike, up through the streets and got to the park edition. So, yeah.
Doran Park, is that at risk of sea level rise, at least in the relative near future?
Yeah. I mean, this has been a real sobering aspect of my career. Even in 2015, when I first got here, I went to some statewide sea level rise, convenings of scientists. And, they said in 20 to 50 years, West Side would go underwater. So if you can think about across the harbor there, and Bay Flat Road and sections would go underwater. But the projections have accelerated over the last, 7-8 years. So that's why we literally got a feasibility study going this year to look at Doran and what our managed retreat options are. I can't tell you what they're going to be, but one of the things that we've been working on with Supervisor Hopkins is just thinking about, you would never build Doran in today's legal environment. There's no way. So we're not going to create another Doran, but we need camping in Sonoma County. So if we start to lose parts of Doran, where can we, site camping in the county that's, up higher? So, but yes, it's threatened for sure. And already on king tides with a big surge, the water comes right up to the road. So it's pretty significant. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Well, we love it when Sonoma County Regional Parks comes to visit. Thank you, Melanie.
Yeah,
We hope
thank
to
you for
see you
having
again
me.
soon for another talk about Sonoma County Regional Parks. And Melanie will be here for a few minutes if you would like to talk to her after the presentations, and we'll see you next